After a long bus journey, we arrived in Antigua and had a 15-minute walk across town to our hotel, stopping by a little music festival on the way.
We stayed in a hotel called Cristales de Antigua La Calzada. Again, pretty basic, but it did have its own Netflix account, so we made the most of that. And started watching Adolescence, which I would recommend. Then went out for some much-needed scran before heading to bed.
The next 3 days were fairly relaxed. We spent time walking around Antigua, eating the local food and focusing on our uni work.
Antigua is a beautiful, vibrant and colourful city, built 1,500 metres above sea level and is classed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
The main form of transport is chicken buses, which are pimped out American school buses. But all the locals seem to ride scooters everywhere, and there are absolutely thousands of them. The main square in the town was full of people trying to sell you hats, and at the centre was this questionable fountain design.
We had a walk up to a local viewpoint, which overlooked the whole city, including Volcán de Agua, a massive extinct volcano as the backdrop. And then we were joined by two little strays, so obviously we had to feed them.
Our favourite spot for lunch was called Rincón Antigueño, a local restaurant that specialised in flame-grilled chicken.
Absolute techers on that.
You got chicken, veg, potatoes and a drink for around £4.
Jack had also found somewhere to visit that he was really excited about, but he wouldn't tell me much about it.
Hobbitonango!
Yep, it's exactly what you're thinking. Exactly like Hobbiton in Lord of the Rings, if you got it from wish.com.
It came with authentic activities like this tire zip line and a large swing that we couldn't get on because there was too many people there.
And not forgetting the Legolas archery range, which Jack did actually nail.
And the Gwimley axe throwing.
But what really topped the trip off was seeing this dog sleeping in such a weird position.
Day 28 and we were up early for our much anticipated volcano hike.
But the surrounding fog meant we couldn't actually see the volcano we were climbing. We met the rest of the group and had a lovely send-off by a couple of puppies at the centre.
The hike was incredibly tough with lots of fog and rain on the way up, but at each stopping point there seemed to be a dog there just to raise morale.
The hike was up Atitlán volcano, which is 3,976 metres above sea level. Atitlán is twinned with Fuego volcano, which is one of the most active volcanoes in the whole of Central America. The hike was pretty tough. We had about 10 kilos on our back and it took about 5.5 hours to get to base camp. And some people in a different group took the easier option of just getting a horse up.
Even though we couldn't see many of the views on the way up, the cloud forest as it's known was incredibly beautiful. Almost as beautiful as the mountain dogs that Beth kept meeting on the way up.
The route was really steep, so we had loads of breaks for the fat people at the back to keep up.
We had a nice stop for lunch and Beth left hungry because she decided to feed all of her food to the local dogs.
How could you resist that?
After some more hiking, and some more petting dogs, and some more hiking, and some more petting dogs, we finally got near the top and could actually see some views.
This was the base camp for soy tours, made up of tin shacks with foam mattresses, crusty sleeping bags, and leather envelopes for pillows.
Lino staple to the ceiling. This is the staggering view from outside of the toilet. The inside view was very, very different.
We had a great view of Fuego volcano, and because it's constantly erupting, you can even see it smoking from the top. That evening we sat and watched a really cool sunset, while the guides cooked us dinner on an open fire.
Finished off with hot chocolate and stargazing.
Then it was freezing, so we got wrapped up for bed, with Jack looking like some sort of sadistic Mother Teresa.
The next morning we were up at 3:45 to hike the summit.
Made easier by more night mountain dogs.
This section of the hike took around an hour. It should have taken about half an hour, but again we were waiting for the fatties at the back.
Despite the continuous, annoying breaks, we made it just in time for sunrise. And it was absolutely stunning, albeit extremely cold.
The shadow of Atitlán stretched almost to the sea, whilst the sunrise looked beautiful on the slopes of Fuego.
We then walked back to base camp where we had pancakes for breakfast. Well, some of us did.
Then at 7:45 it was time to say goodbye to my pancake and base camp and head back down the mountain. The way back down was a lot more enjoyable, as it was a lot less physically taxing. It only took 2.5 hours and the views were absolutely stunning.
And what would the final leg be without one more pat of a mountain dog? We went back to the centre and had a celebratory beer, a celebratory dessert taco, and then some laundry to wash all our disgusting clothes.
After we had breakfast and picked up our washing, we headed into town, where the city was preparing for a parade in the lead up to the Easter holidays.
They were about to start parading through the streets with massive floats, but unfortunately we had to go run for our bus, so we missed the parade. The bus from Antigua to Lake Atitlán took about 2 hours. And when we first got on the bus, we decided to book our Vietnam flight for November. By using Avios points, we saved about 600 quid. So if you don't know about Avios, get to know.
Our driver drove at breakneck speeds, paying no attention to his co-driver. But we arrived in Panajachel safely.
We stayed in Hospedaje, and although it's probably the most budget accommodation we've stayed in so far, we also had the warmest welcome of the trip so far from the host Juan.
The bathroom facilities were around the corner with the classic non-EU regulated shower, featuring lots of exposed wiring and some fairly basic toilets with only one toilet roll per room.
Armed with my bag of dog food, we were ready to set out on our walk and had a wander down the main street of Panajachel, or Pana as the locals call it. Straight away, finding one happy customer.
This was the view of Lake Atitlán from the shore, and with it almost being sunset, we headed into a bar to have a very questionable sangria.
For dinner, we treated ourselves to an actual legit restaurant and had a burger and some pasta.
But it did give me a dodgy stomach.
Then we headed back to the accommodation via this beautiful pile of sleeping dogs.
The next morning we got up early and took a boat to San Juan and San Pedro, 2 towns on the other side of the lake. The journey across was really pretty, with views of local volcanoes and towns on the way.
Our first stop was San Juan, a really colourful town with paintings everywhere and traditional bands playing music in the street.
I found us a local coffee plantation, and though they weren't doing tours, we could still do a bit of tasting. So we had ourselves a brew with a view.
The next obscure activity that Jack had found for us was, of course, the Mayan stingless bee experience. They had about 4 different types of bees and they were absolutely tiny. So after we got to see loads of different hives, we got to do some honey tasting. We got to try 11 different honeys and they were all banging.
Then we took a tuk-tuk round the corner to the town of San Pedro. The town was absolutely stunning, with paintings and murals everywhere. So we just had a walk around and took it all in. Then we finished up at a restaurant by the lake and had a schnitzel burger and possibly the best shawarma wrap of my life.
Then we took a quick tuk-tuk back to San Juan so we could make the water taxi back to Pana. The next morning we'd booked a 2-hour lesson at the local Spanish school. How's it going, Jack? I'm panicking.
The teacher mentioned a local nature reserve, so we decided to go over and have a visit. There was a butterfly conservation project with butterflies of every colour. Loads of walkways through the forest and lots of hanging bridges that were very bouncy to give you views down the canyon.
And then we were lucky enough to spot some spider monkeys just playing around, so we just stood and watched them for about 15 minutes. And then we even spotted a coati, which is basically a Central or South American raccoon. And it's very cute. Up close it looks like this.
We had a scenic walk back to the accommodation, and that night went out for some barbecued steak and chicken. And obviously Beth had to feed her leftover steak to a stray dog on the way back. The next morning was another 2-hour Spanish lesson before we cooked our own ginormous lunch, and then I got a fresh trim at a Guatemalan barber.
Via stopping to feed another good boy.
The next morning we were up at 3:45 to pack our bags and get a bus.
This bus was going all the way from Panajachel to Santa Ana with a stop in Antigua where we had a massive breakfast. And apparently it's the quiche hotspot, so I obviously had some and it was great.
The whole journey was meant to take 10 hours start to finish, but with bus delays it took almost 13.
But we got there in the end and said goodbye to Guatemala and hello to El Salvador.
I'll see thee.